Actually, my first series of government jobs were during high school. I was part of the Youth Conservation Corps. And over successive summers, I went from being a crew member to a crew chief to being a team lead and then actually running the program. So very quickly, I saw this series of steps from being a worker bee to somebody who had to think of a whole group of people and manage that. And what I learned is a lot of really useful things. One is managing diversity. People with a wide diversity of backgrounds, interests. The other is managing diverse expectations and what people want out of it. For most people, it was a summer job, something to make a few bucks. But how do you motivate people? How do you get people to want to achieve more? It was a great, very early in my life experience, and I still harken back to that and think about times where there were people who were tough to work with and how you could get them to become more of a team member. I think I've always, throughout my government career, have asked questions about why or why not. So there are a lot of things people confront a wall and they get frustrated. And I ask the question, well, why is the wall there? Walls aren't easy to build. Walls are really hard to build. So if there's a reason somebody took the time, or an organization or an entity built that wall, it served a purpose. Now that purpose may be, it may have outlived its purpose. So now it's time to think about tearing down the wall or doing an end run around the wall. But first understanding why it exists and then being able to say, okay, how can we acknowledge that barrier and yet still try to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish since things have changed since the barrier was first built. That's something I've always tried to ask. And instead of, sucking my teeth and throwing up my hands and saying, oh gosh, government's hard and we've got all these things that we can't do, really kind of try to work within that framework. Try to be, innovate within the challenging environment that we find ourselves. The biggest thing I would say is embrace ambiguity. Things are complex and they don't always, there's not always a coherence. There's no great master plan that at some point you're going to understand and the light switch will flick and you'll say, this aha moment. The more you become comfortable with ambiguity, with the uncertainty of knowing what you know, but also being comfortable with what you don't know, the better off you'll be. And I would also say read a lot. There's some great books that will help you kind of work through that. A couple of my favorites are, one is The Death of Common Sense. It's a book by Philip Howard. And he talks about the challenges of people following the rules to unfortunate outcomes. Another favorite book of mine is Orbiting the Giant Hairball, which is a great personal memoir about working in a large organization and how you can use the conceit in that book is that any organization has gravity. That's what allows you to get things done versus being an individual or being part of a small organization. The challenge is anytime you have a large organization, you begin to get ensnared in hairballs of organizational complexity. So how do you take advantage of the gravity, use that orbit to get things done, but don't kind of fly out of orbit? It's a phenomenal little book. And so those things, reading those books can help you think bigger about your special personal situation. Well, without a doubt, and I've received this many times, and I think this is especially true of government employees, but is true in general, which is there's no limit to what you can achieve when you give other people credit. So as it's often said, that success has many fathers, failure's an orphan. Well, it's also true that if you don't focus on saying who gets credit for what you're trying to achieve, you will be able to achieve much more. The other is, it's very important to learn from failure. Oftentimes people want to flee from failure, but some of the most important learning I've had in my career has come from learning from failure and being able to look in the mirror after failure and understand how things could have been differently or how things can be better in the future. That learning from failure is very much a part of the innovation culture of places like Silicon Valley. It's much less well tolerated in government for that reason, we in my Office of eDiplomacy actually held a fail fair where we had people discuss their failures, share their lessons learned, and that was a very successful event, and had some very simple rules. Talk in the first person, no humble brag, and tell what you learned. So again, is get to know people in your own organization, but also network with, there's a ton of great ways to network with other counterparts in other organizations who are facing similar challenges. The other is to stretch out to even beyond your immediate network and your geographic location and get to know people who are facing the same challenges you're facing in other industries. All too often we become kind of wrapped in our cocoon of where we work, and not, professional networking platforms are ubiquitous now, and to be able to use those platforms to be able to reach out and get answers. For digital natives, it's almost second nature, but for some people who maybe aren't digital natives, embracing those will be to their advantage. There is no bigger platform than government. Even the largest company can't achieve the great things that government can. At the same time, government's incredibly complex and difficult. It's challenging. So you think of a battleship. If you're, sitting on the deck of a battleship and you've got a small, a small sail, you're not going to be able to change the direction of that battleship. Now, if you were sitting on a windboard, you could be very agile with that same sail, but you wouldn't be having much heft. So the idea that you're part of something much bigger, that a marginal change that you could make in government can have a dramatic downstream impact is tremendous. So there's no bigger platform, there's no better way to serve, and frankly, government needs bright, young, creative thinkers who aren't bound by tradition. So it's in the interest of government to bring the best and the brightest in to help us push our boundaries and push our comfort level.